And of course, Edward Gibbon has such a negative feeling toward the Byzantines, and he does set the tone for a lot of historians who come after. And lastly, the problem with the Byzantines is, unfortunately, they lost. All of their territories were, taken over essentially by a hostile religion, a hostile people, a hostile background. The Turks in Istanbul really, well, I shouldn't get into that. But if you're going to study Turkey in school, you're probably want to study, well, how did it become the way it is now? So you're going to study Ottoman, or if you're studying the Middle East, you're studying Islamic history. And Byzantines, they're just sort of dropped because they were unsuccessful. They're not still here. And so I think all of these factors, you end up with just not talking about them. I mean, I was a history major. I attended 2 very good institutions, and outside of one art class, I never heard about the Byzantines. It's 1,000 years, and it's fascinating stuff. The stories in there are just as good as Roman stories, which, there's series on HBO, there's bestsellers, but it just gets dropped. Yes?
A comment and question. The year 2004, the Pope apologized to the ecumenical patriarch for the damage done by the fourth Crusade. And the question is, was that the mosaic that you've shown us for the conversion of Constantine to Christianity in the same church, San Vital in Ravenna, with the Justinian and Theodora? That mosaic was from Ravenna, from the same church?
I believe so.
I don't think
Apollinaire, it's a different church.
the Arian one.
It's the Arian, that's right. It's the Arian baptistry.
It's under Theodoric, not...
Right. So it's Theodoric who built it. It's the Arian, in the Arian baptistry.
Oh, the one outside?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, just a comment on the Pope. The Pope in 1204 actually excommunicated all the Crusaders who had taken part in it. He then, saw it was a good thing because it's bringing the Constantinople back into the Roman fold. Yeah, that's one. Yes.
Edward Luttwak has written a book lately about the strategy of the Byzantines. Are you aware of his work, and what do you think of the book?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very interesting book. What a great idea to take a look at the strategy, because I do think that's one of the most interesting parts. How on earth did this empire survive for 1,000 years? Other than Venice, their republic lasted 1,000 years. No other government can make this claim. So I think he does some very good work in addressing this. Yes.
And are you aware of what George Seferi says about Ed Gibbon's work? He says, a civilization cannot be in decline for 1,000 years.
Excellent.
That's good.
Is there, yeah.
Yeah, what role did just the sheer size of the land walls play in the empire surviving as long as it did? I mean, diplomacy was one thing, but the walls maybe are equally important or more important.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right. The Theodosian land walls were probably the greatest fortification ever made in the Middle Ages, a little earlier. And there are countless examples. Attila the Hun, for example, who shows up at the walls and then has second thoughts again and again and again in its history. And it's been said that had Constantine or Theodosius built those walls even a fraction of a bit lower, the empire wouldn't have lasted. I mean, the walls played a paramount part because Constantinople, no matter how bad it got, you could not take Constantinople except by treachery. And as long as you had Constantinople, you had an empire. And to that point, after it falls in 1453, the Byzantine Empire still technically existed, in Trebizond and in Epirus. It didn't completely fall until 1261, but the real heart of it was gone. Yes.
You showed the cannon earlier that shot the big
Right.
stone ball through the walls. That cannon was cast by a Hungarian.
Right. Urban.
And it took 3 months to travel from northern Thrace to Constantinople, aided by 5,000 men.
Right. That was an incredible. You have to hand it to the Ottomans. It was an incredible engineering feat to get it there, and then they could only fire it once every couple hours, was it?
4 hours.
Once every 4 hours, let it cool down. You could not pay me enough to run one of those things, exploding in your face. Of course, they didn't pay them.
By the way, the Turks take credit for the progress of the West. You thought of that?
This is not
Say,
right.
if we didn't push the Byzantines to the West was not progress.
Right.
Would not progress like it is now.
Right.
We
Well,
take credit for it.
Okay. I guess. Yes.
With a large empire, land-based, but also maritime empire. You make some comments about the role, not only the naval forces as such, but also of the commerce navy. The peak imperial years, but also the decline, because especially in those marginal periods of time, we don't hear about that until the conqueror comes and occupies Greece, and then within 50 years, Greece has commerce, has a navy, has other things,
Right.
and prospers, seaports and so on.
Right.
So what role did more maritime activities play in the empire?
I could give a real snapshot view of the Byzantine navy. When the Roman Empire sort of chased all the pirates out of the sea, which they would do every once in a while, if they had real enemies to fight, you need a navy. The problem was, every time the Byzantines would scrape up a navy, defeat their enemy, they're usually pirates, would sweep them from the sea, then they really didn't need a large navy. They were paying a lot of money for it. They had a very dominating navy, and as I said before, with Greek fire, you could immolate, they could fill up clay pots with Greek fire and lob them. They had a type of flamethrower. One time they even pumped it underwater so it came up and burned the ships below the waterline. So they're very formidable. Around the 11th century, or 10th century, they started to try to save money by cutting the navy, and eventually they made the suicidal decision to entrust naval security to Venice and Genoa.
Outsourcing.
Exactly. Now what you want to do. Certain more far-seeing emperors did see the trouble with this, and they tried to scrape up a navy together, but the problem was always money. And one emperor would make a navy, and it would be in decent shape, and you'd win a couple victories, and then the next emperor, there's not that many enemies around because you've had this victory, and so let's slash the fleet. And eventually, when the Turks show up in 1453, the Byzantine navy consists of 3 ships. 20, 3 of which are seaworthy. So they just loaded them down with Greek fire and pushed them toward the navy, the oncoming navy.
So the reconquest, especially the Aegean Islands, and Crete, etc., was due to rebuilding of the state navy, or just of local forces in other cities?
The state navy, if you look at the Macedonian dynasty, of course, Romanus Lecapenus, the gentle usurper, was the admiral, and he came to power, and he built up the navy, and of course, Nicephorus Phocas conquers Crete. That was a period of imperial strength. The Macedonian dynasty was a period of rebuilding of the navy. You really see the period between the Persians sort of fall and before the Arabs get a navy. There's a lag there, and during that time, the Byzantines dropped their navy, and this was the problem. So then the Macedonians rebuilt it. It fell again. After the First Crusade, they tried to rebuild it again. After the Fourth Crusade, they're done.